Hello, I'm Brittany Marshall. On this edition of Commuter Connections, we take a deep dive into MDOT/MTA's plans and initiatives that are set to bring Maryland the best transit system in the nation. That includes the 50-year statewide transit plan and MTA's transition to a zero-emission bus fleet. Also, we will break down the details on new technology enhancements available for riders and the updated bike policy that now includes electric scooters and bikes. All on this edition of Commuter Connections. Coming into this year, MDOT/MTA is implementing plans and projects that are set to create a better transit experience for all riders, not only this year, but for 50 years from now. To tell us more about these plans and projects for the future, we're joined by MTA's Administrator, Holly Arnold. Holly, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
MDOT/MTA accomplished so much in 2021, Holly, and a lot of it was through the vision of the 5-year strategic plan. Why was this plan so important in creating and plans and implementations for different initiatives throughout transit?
Yeah, MTA's strategic plan, it's titled Rebuilding Better, Committed to an Equitable Transit Future, was really necessary to guide MTA's recovery through and beyond the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic really gave us an opportunity to pause and think about how we do things. And it gives us the opportunity to ensure that we are continuing to come through and recover and be committed to equity, to safety, to sustainability, and it identifies substantive ways to create a better future for all Marylanders.
And we talk about we accomplished so much. What were some of the key accomplishments that really stood out for you?
Yeah, so there's so many things that we've accomplished in 2021 driven by that strategic plan. A few that stand out are really North Avenue Rising. So we've added more dedicated bus lanes, shelters, and real-time signs throughout that project. It's a $27 million investment in partnership with Baltimore City to improve the transit, bike, and pedestrian travel experience along North Avenue in the city. The majority of that project was complete in 2021, and we expect that it'll be finalized this year. We also opened our Kirkbus Facility. This facility is really an investment in the future. It allows us to store our buses inside, away from the elements, and it's going to be the first facility to receive electric buses in 2023. We're also continuing to invest in technology. So we've launched real-time information for Metro Subway and real-time crowding information for bus. And that's really all about choices. We want to make sure that we're continuing to provide that real-time information that allows riders to make those choices. We also announced the Fast Forward initiative. So that's a $43 million investment in making transit faster and more reliable, making it more accessible and easier to use. So that includes additional dedicated bus lanes to improve speed and reliability, ADA improvements and shelters to make it more accessible, and real-time signs and updated wayfinding at our Metro and light rail stations. We're implementing that on an accelerated schedule, so riders will see some of those first improvements this year and the rest phased in through 2023.
MTA also announced some initiatives and projects in 2021, but will actually make an impact not only this year, but many years down the road. Can you talk about some of those as well?
Yeah, so we continue to make investments in projects that are going to pay off for years to come. One of those big ones is a new fare collection system. So we announced this year the selection of a vendor to overhaul our fare collection system. It's really a crucial investment in our state of good repair efforts and reflects our commitment to implement a diverse and equitable range of fare payment options for our riders. The completed system is going to be $63 million and will give riders a better overall transit experience from start to finish. So that is going to be phased in. Riders will start to see improvements in 2023, and the full system will be operational in 2025. The other thing that we announced this year is ordering our first zero-emission buses. So we are really excited to start moving forward on that project. We are going to be receiving 7 electric buses in 2023 that begin our transition into that full zero-emission fleet. It's going to make transit an even more eco-friendly option and will improve air quality for our riders, for our operators, and for the entire region.
And we're so excited to actually be talking about many of these topics later in the show in deeper detail. So can't wait for that to happen as well. Holly, could you tell us kind of what, as administrator, what are some of your goals coming into just 2022 after 2 years of dealing with a pandemic and moving transit forward now?
Yeah, so as we continue to emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic, I think those goals that I outlined in Fast Forward really encompass what we're trying to accomplish this year. We want to continue to invest in the riders who have been here throughout the pandemic and make transit faster, more reliable, make it more accessible, and really make it easier to use. We're also going to have continued investments in state of good repair and safety, helping with reliability, and then those customer-focused initiatives like more dedicated bus lanes and improved stops and stations.
And a project that kind of emulates that, I remember, is there is a East-West Corridor project with collaboration with Baltimore City. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm really excited about that one. It's really kind of taking off from the lessons that we learned from the North Avenue Rising project and taking that to another East-West corridor. So it's a great $50 million project in partnership with the federal government through a $22 million RAISE grant, $18 million from the state, and another $10 million from the city. It includes 10 miles of dedicated bus lanes, transit signal priority throughout the corridor, as well as ADA improvements, real-time signs, bus shelters, benches, trash cans. I can keep going. It's just going to be huge improvements for our riders throughout the entire system. It allows us to continue those great partnerships that we've made to make improvements for transit, bike, and pedestrian travel.
And of course, we're talking about the future, and the big thing for the future for MTA, of course, is the statewide transit plan. We're talking to Jay Clayton a little bit later in the show about that. But could you give us some details on the importance as the administrator of MTA on why this plan is so important?
It's really important to plan for the future so that we can have that vision of where we're going as an agency and as a state. So the statewide transit plan is a 50-year vision and roadmap for a comprehensive connected transit system throughout the state. Historically, we've had local plans and regional plans, and this will be the first time that as a state, we all get together and put together all of those smaller plans into that larger comprehensive vision. And it's great. It's going to give us that roadmap of how to move forward, and a lot of the projects that we're talking about today we'll continue to build on that in the statewide transit plan.
Thank you so much, Holly, for telling us about the future of transit, goals for this year. We really appreciate you coming on the show and informing our riders and the public. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
Now we're going to take a closer look into the 50-year statewide transit plan. It's the first of its kind here in the state. And to tell us more about it is MDOT-MTA's Manager of Project Development, Jay Clayton. Jay, thanks for joining us today to talk about the statewide transit plan.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me, what was the goal of this plan, this 50-year plan for transit?
Yes, the goal of this 50-year plan is to lay out the goals and strategies for a coordinated regional and intercity transit network for the state of Maryland. It brings together the existing and planned transit connections that we, MDOT-MTA, operate, as well as the existing and planned transit connections of over 20 other transit providers across the state. Right now, there's no plan that shows all of the agency plans in one place.
And so you spoke about bringing all the agency plans in one place. That means working with all the jurisdictions in Maryland. How were you guys able to collaborate?
So throughout the development of the plan, we have worked closely with our MDOT leadership, other state agencies, metropolitan planning organizations, and the local planning and transit agencies. So we held 2 regional roundtables to engage other state, regional, and local staff who have really valuable insight as staff on the ground, who really understand their own transit connections in each jurisdiction. And then we have a 3rd roundtable coming up that's actually a statewide roundtable, because we heard throughout the first 2 that one region was curious what the other region was talking about. So we're going to bring them all together for the big finale with the draft plan out and get their input and get this finalized.
And with all that input that you all have, how are you able to integrate it all into one plan?
Great question. We started the development of the draft plan by reviewing all those existing plans that I mentioned, a lot of data, a lot of conversations with various other partners, and then use that to generate ideas for content, what to focus on in the overall approach. So it's been a collaborative effort to make those decisions. We also reviewed existing conditions to better understand the needs and trends across the state, and use the regional roundtables to help hone in on what's actionable and measurable strategies that will achieve the vision and goals of the plan.
So the 50-year plan, the draft version of the plan, is available right now on the M.MTA website. What do you hope that riders will see and get out of being able to view this plan?
We hope that they see themselves in these plans. We've put in a lot of examples of trying to relate very technical strategies to what success looks like for a rider. So when we're doing installation of like environmental protective measures and facilities, what does that mean for a rider? We've tried to do a good job of translating that in a way that is meaningful for the public.
Going deeper into the plan, what are some of the action items and strategies that will be implemented through this plan?
So with all of the jurisdictions in this plan, we created 25 enhanced or expanded transit connections, regional or intercity transit connections across the state. After that, you'll find 31 strategies to achieve the vision and goals described in the plan. And that includes goals like being more equitable, being more environmentally sustainable and financially sustainable, being innovative and incorporating technology in ways that benefit our riders and also make us more cost effective as an agency. And then following those 25 connections and 31 strategies, we have several metrics about how we will measure success if we have implemented this plan in a successful way for our riders and as an agency and our partners. And then we have a 5-year action plan. We hear a lot, are we going to have to wait 50 years for things in this plan to be implemented? And the answer is no. We'll just continue iterating on the action plans over the next 50 years for our current riders and for future generations.
So we have this plan in written form that's available online, but what are the next steps?
Yeah, we have the plan available online for the public comment period now. That comment period ends on February 18th. So once we have input from our riders, from the statewide roundtable that we're holding, from all these other organizations and groups that we're collecting feedback from, we will incorporate that into revisions in the plan. We'll work with MDOT leadership and MTA leadership to make sure it's a good plan and then finalize that and hopefully get it out and start implementing that 5-year action plan.
Well, Jade, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Thanks for telling us more about this 50-year plan for transit.
Sure, you're welcome. I'm glad to share it, and I hope anyone listening will get online and comment on this plan. We really need more feedback on it.
Up next, a look into some new technology available for riders through the Transit app. Stay with us. Coming into this year, riders can now utilize 2 new technology enhancements on the Transit app, each available to give riders a more safe, reliable, and comfortable transit experience. To tell us more about it, we're joined by M.MTA's Chief Innovation Officer, Mike Helta. Mike, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
So there's 2 new features on the Transit app, but one is bus crowding feature. Could you tell us all about how that works?
Over the past few years, we've been updating the hardware and the equipment and the software on all of our the fleet of our buses, which is about 750 buses. One of those upgrades is that we put these really, really accurate automated passenger counters on them. And so when you board on the bus or when you get off the bus through either door, the sensor will basically sense you with high fidelity to know how many people are entering and how many people are exiting the bus. These sensors are accurate. I think it's like 95 to 96% of the time. It's counting people exactly correct, which is really good in this industry.
And in the times we're in right now, this is definitely a good option for riders if they want to feel safer or even just feel more comfortable riding.
Exactly. Yeah. So the software, basically after the bus leaves every single stop, it recalculates how many people got off, how many people got on, and then sends that up to a server, which then we send that to the Transit app every about 10 or 15 seconds. And so it's updated very frequently. And we've created 3 buckets of categorizations that you'll see in the Transit app. One is not crowded, one is some crowding, and one is very crowded. And so we look at the numbers and we say that roughly if the bus is about 30 to 35% full, anywhere below that, we're going to say that it's not crowded, because that means you're going to have plenty of seats to find, plenty of space to stand if you want to choose to do that, plenty of chance to kind of spread yourself out. Between 30 and 35% and 75%, that's some crowding. There'll still probably be a bunch of seats available. There'll still be some chance to spread yourself out. Anything over 75% of total capacity of the bus, we're going to say is very crowded. And that's where you're starting to see there might not be as many seats to choose from, if any at all. Probably be some area to stand in. But we hope that those three kind of categories give you a rough idea of what to expect as the bus is approaching you.
So when riders open the transit app, how can they find this feature?
So when you open it, next to every single little bus icon that you see on the map, there will be a set of 1, 2, or 3 kind of little people icons. And so 1 is not crowded, 2 is some crowding, and 3 is very crowded. And so that'll be available on the map. And next to some of the predictions, it'll usually be there as well to let you know what the buses are. So if the bus approaching you is very crowded and you want to have a little bit more space, and maybe there's a bus 5 or 10 minutes behind then that doesn't have much crowding on it, you can make that choice to wait for the one behind it. You'll have a better chance at a seat in that respect. So it allows you to the chance to kind of make some decisions on your own based on your comfort levels.
And this bus crowding feature is part of MDOT/MTA's full initiative to bring more real-time information to riders. And part of that has been getting more modes on real-time, tracking real-time technology through the transit app. So tell me about one has been added just recently, one mode. Can you tell us about that and those features?
Yeah. So we recently got the Metro Subway Link system added to our real-time, predictive arrival capabilities. And so in the transit app, you can now look for the Metro system and see where all the vehicles are. Again, that one also updates every 10 to 15 seconds, so it's very accurate. The GPS lat and longs on it are super accurate. The predictions are pretty good. Luckily, on a train system that has its own dedicated guideway, the predictions are really solid because, like on the bus side, you think about a bus hits traffic, and a prediction is really hard to predict what's going to happen with traffic. When you're a train, you have your own rail system. It's a little easier for those predictions. So the predictions are really solid. That feeds up there. So go ahead and check it out. We're really excited to get that out before the end of the year.
And for some riders who are new to the transit app, how many modes are available for real-time tracking?
So right now we've got all but one of the modes on transit app. So we have commuter bus, commuter rail, MARC train, local bus, subway, metro, and we're still working on light rail. Hopefully going to launch that in the next couple of months, and then we'll have all of our core services and all of our kind of open services available on the transit app.
And how important is it to be able to give riders this real-time information in different ways so they can kind of know what's going on with their buses and trains?
I think it's incredibly important. I think as data and information, it has become something that's right at our fingertips. It's right on our phones. We expect and we demand the idea that we can know what our expectation and what our traveling is going to be like. And so instead of waiting at a stop kind of on our time and just wondering if a vehicle will show up, we want to give that time back to you, allow you to plan your day, allow you to make the decisions on your own.
And where can people find information on the real-time tracking information, but as well on how to download the transit app?
Yeah, so there's kind of an FAQ information page on our website. You can also go to the Google or the Apple app stores and download it. Just type in transit. It's a green logo with kind of like a inverted white like S pipe on there. It's just called transit. Download it. And as soon as you do, it'll detect where you are and automatically start showing you all of the services around where you're located.
Thank you so much, Mike, for breaking this all down for us and letting our riders know what features are available for them this year. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks a lot.
A transition plan to move to a zero-emission bus fleet is underway at MDOT/MTA. To tell us more on this plan and how long the transition will take, we're joined by MDOT/MTA's Acting Deputy Administrator and Chief Planning, Programming, and Engineering Officer, Kate Sylvester. Kate, welcome to the show. We really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brittany. Nice to be here.
So we're talking about the transition to a zero-emission bus fleet for MTA. Why is it so important that the agency does this?
This is really exciting to talk about. So transitioning our bus fleet to a zero-emission fleet means cleaner air in all of the communities where we operate bus service. It also means cleaner air in our divisions for all of our employees and our mechanics. zero-emission buses operate more quietly in the communities as well, which is nice. And it's really exciting to be bringing this new and evolving and really cutting-edge technology into the Baltimore region.
And it's a transition plan because it will take time. It's a lot of buses. So tell us how this transition plan will work and kind of the years that it will take.
So the first step is a pilot project. So we will have 7 battery electric buses arriving either late this year or early in 2023. And so the first step is running a pilot. That'll be run out of Kirk Division, which is in sort of northeast Baltimore. And we'll test those buses out on as many routes as we can. So customers will see them out in service beginning in 2023. And we'll be kind of putting them through their paces, right? Seeing how they perform in our service area with our passenger loading and the routes that we run them on. And we'll be collecting all kinds of data out of that pilot service. Then we'll continue to operate those. And then starting in 2025 is when we start to get 70 electric buses a year. So that's when we'll really be scaling up and bringing them throughout the service area and beginning that full scale transition.
So how is this pilot program going to be funded?
So the pilot program is funded by a couple of discretionary grants that MTA was awarded. So a little under $3 million in a Federal Transit Administration low and no emissions grant program funding, about $3.6 million in Volkswagen mitigation funding, and that's matched by about $7.5 million in state funding.
This is such a large project. How are the goals created to kind of put this implementation in place?
The state has the Maryland Greenhouse Gas Emissions Reduction Act plan. That's a mouthful, but so that is the first plan. I think in 2019, that created the commitment to begin transitioning our bus fleet to zero emissions. And then in MTA's regional transit plan, we put the commitment and the goal in there to transition 50% of our bus fleet to zero emissions by 2030. So that's kind of setting our targets, and we do the details from there. We build in the transition strategy and figure out how to put all the pieces in place to reach those goals.
So I know we're starting with the pilot program and then transitioning as we go along throughout the years. What and why did MTA decide to take that approach?
So MTA has a bus fleet of about 760 buses. So we have quite a few vehicles. And the way that we manage that is that we retire and purchase about 70 buses a year, right? That keeps our bus fleet in a state of good repair. It makes sure that we always have new buses coming in and we're retiring old buses. And that's really all about providing reliable service on a daily basis. So when we think about transitioning to zero emission vehicles, we want to keep that sort of purchase and retirement pattern going so that we make sure that we're providing that reliable service at every step along the way with this transition.
So what would you say is the target goal as we go through this process with the zero emission bus fleet? What is something that riders can kind of know will or is set to happen?
So our goal is to transition 50% of MTA's bus fleet to zero emission vehicles by the year 2030. And our estimate is that when we do that, or by doing that, we will avoid 500 million pounds of carbon dioxide emissions in our environment with those buses that we'll be purchasing between 2025 and 2030. So definitely a significant contribution to our environmental goals. And I think some nice benefits for our riders as well with a quieter and comfortable and reliable ride.
Sounds like a win-win for the agency and the community. Thank you so much, Kate, for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. We're excited about it. Happy to share some information.
Coming up, an update to MTA's bike policy that many riders will enjoy. Stay with us. MTA recently updated its bike policy to now include electronic scooters and bikes. To tell us more about this decision and some of the safety requirements behind it, we talked to transit planner Tabia Gamble. Tabia, welcome to the show. We are so happy to have you here with us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's get into this updated bike policy. What was the reason that MTA decided to update the policy to include e-scooters and e-bikes?
So a couple years ago, when the scooters and bikes became a lot more popular in Baltimore, there wasn't as much data here in Baltimore and across the country. And so with the data that we've collected over the last few years, we just have a better understanding of the e-scooters and the e-bikes and how they work. And so that really, prompted us to update our guidance on them.
And who led the process of making that happen?
Yeah, so this process was led by MDOT/MTA's Office of Safety Management and Risk Control, and then the Office of Planning, which I sit in, and the various modes, MARC, Light Rail, Metro, and Bus, along with the Office of Communications and Marketing, kind of assisted in this effort.
And of course, we say e-scooters and e-bikes, but what exactly is allowed on transit?
So there is some specific guidance, right? So for the e-scooters, it has to be personally owned and it has to be folding to be allowed on any of our transit vehicles. And for the e-bikes, it has to be 50 pounds or less to be brought onto the buses, on the front of the bus racks, or on MARC, Metro, and Light Rail.
And there's no charging on our transit vehicles, correct?
There's absolutely no charging on our transit vehicles or on any of our property. So even if you're at a station, if you're on platforms, there are no charging of these e-scooters or e-bikes allowed.
And what modes are available for this updated bike policy?
Yeah, so like I previously mentioned, these updated policies are going to include all of our services. So the MARC, Metro, Light Rail, and local bus.
Wonderful. Great update. And can you tell me, of course, with something new, there also comes some safety measures that are put in place. Could you explain some of those and how riders can be safe while having their e-scooter and e-bikes on the transit vehicles?
Yeah, so as with any new guidance or an MTA's top priority, right, is the safety of our riders and our operators. And so kind of with this new guidance, we want to make sure that folks are still staying safe while also kind of expanding their accessibility and the equity of these services. And so our top concerns, are really kind of making sure there's no additional tripping hazards. For the bus, the tripping hazard for an e-bike is not really there because you're racking it on the front. But for the e-scooter, these can create some tripping hazards, both for the passenger that's riding with the e-scooter and for other passengers that are riding. So ensuring that we're keeping these out of the aisles. So if you have an e-scooter, making sure that it's folded at all times while you're on the station platforms or while you're inside of any MTA vehicle. If you're carrying a bike with you, just making sure that you're kind of getting on after other passengers have either boarded or alighted the vehicle to allow for them to kind of make space for you. And, we do encourage folks that are riding on a bus to keep it either on their lap or the e-scooters on their lap or to keep it between their legs, right? So that it's not in the way of anyone else.
So Tavia, can you tell us where can riders find these safety guidelines so they can stay safe?
Yes, you can find the updated guidelines on the bike website. So that's at www.mta.maryland.gov/bike. And there you'll find kind of the updated guidance on bringing these e-scooters and e-bikes onto vehicles. And then you can always call the Customer Transit Information Call Center, which is known as TIC. And that phone number is 410-539-5000.
And MDOT/MTA has always been on the forefront of promoting bicycle use and connecting it to transit. Are there any other initiatives going on within the agency for bike use?
Yeah, so right now we're kind of partnering with some of the other local jurisdictions to ensure that there is adequate bike parking facilities at all of our stops and stations. And so that's including bike corrals so that you can park your bike when you get to these different stations. If you don't want to travel, particularly if you're renting a bike and you just want to get to your first and last mile of your destination. So that's one of the really big things that we're working on right now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tavia, for joining us. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate you breaking down the safety importance of the new updated bike policy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of another edition of Commuter Connections. Thanks for joining us. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.